Good morning. Welcome to our Smart Data Center Summit 2021. I hope everyone is stay safe and well. My name is Jeevan Tangapan. I'm the managing editor for CXO Middle East Magazine, Inside Middle East Magazine. Before we get started, a couple of housekeeping rules. So all the attendees are in listen-only mode. If you have any questions for our speakers or panelists, please use the Q&A function within Zoom. And we are recording this webinar. If you want a copy of the recording, please do get in touch with us. And feel free to engage with us on social media. You can see our hashtag SmartDC, that's our hashtag on Twitter. And a quick look at the agenda today. Let me take this opportunity to thank our sponsors, our signature partners, Google Cloud, CommScope, Lenovo, and Rubrik, and our event partners, iSolutions, Trident, Panduit, and Exclusive Networks. All right, so let's get this started, right? The enterprise data center is undergoing a radical change. It's a fundamental transformation, right? With the advent of the next-gen technologies such as cloud, 5G, IoT, Edge, it's time to rethink the way we design and manage data centers. In fact, true digital transformation starts in your data center because it cannot meet today's business demands for scale, agility, and low latency performance with a traditional data center, which is why you need a modern data center as a right foundation for your digital transformation initiatives. So today we are joined by some of the leading industry experts to talk about the various aspects of data center modernization and transformation. And our first speaker of the day is going to talk about perhaps one of the most important trends affecting the data center today, which is the cloud. So we have with us today Marwan Al-Bayrad, Partner Enablement Lead at Middle East and Africa at Google Cloud. He's going to talk about the basics of migrating into the cloud. And he's a business value creator with more than 18 years of experience in IT and telecom. He's a techie at heart, and he started his career as a software developer before specializing in telecom transformation and consulting. He spent 10 years at HPE, leading the business development motion of the telco OSS portfolio in the Middle East and Africa, before leading the telco practice at Gartner. He joined Google Cloud in 2019 with a mandate to build Google Cloud's ecosystem of partners in the Middle East and Africa region, focusing on global SIs. Marwan, take it away.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Jeevan. Now let me just 1 second to share my screen and get started. Please let me know when my screen is visible.
Yes, we can see your screen.
It is visible. All right, terrific. Thank you very much. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jeevan. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Marwan, and thank you very much, Jeevan, for the introduction. As you said, so I'm leading the partner engineering practice in Middle East and Africa at Google Cloud, working very closely with our partners across the whole region, building their capabilities and helping them in their go-to-market motion. So today we'll be talking about migrating to the cloud overall from your on-prem infrastructure, whether it is a dual server, hyper-converged infrastructure that is lurking somewhere in your kitchen, or a tier 4 super data center, and pretty much everything in between. So for us, the approach is pretty much the same. In this webinar, we'll focus on the first step of moving to the cloud, and that's what we call the discovery phase. To do so, we will start by answering the question of why migrate at all. Then we'll look at some common blockers. After that, we'll delve into the first step or first phase of our migration methodology, which is discovery. We will close with some examples of how to engage with Google Cloud. First of all, so every enterprise and customer has some kind of on-prem or resources or data center. They can be diverse in their nature. but none of it gives them any tangible benefits. In fact, it's worse than that. It is a massive burden. So it constrains their staff because they have to do very much laborious tasks related to infrastructure procurement and maintenance. It means they are using legacy systems that are old and don't add any value to the business other than keeping the lights on. And it means they cannot scale with any ease. They are locked into what they have on-prem and forced to pay to over-provision for peak usage. So most CIOs know already that there is a lot to be gained to be in the cloud, whether it is reliability, agility, cost savings, security, and many more. So according to this poll that was done by McKinsey back in 2019, agility and reliability come as first priorities to most CIOs. They are usually followed by cost efficiency and security. When we talk about security here, we add everything that's related to risk regulation as well. Having said that, the move to the cloud is a long and hard process. Some of the headwinds you might face in order of importance. Number one, lack of skilled resources. Cloud is arguably the most sought after tech skill nowadays. We have developed education, certification programs to help you in your learning journey in that space. Second is the security and regulation. And when we talk about regulation specific in our region, problems from data residency all the way to operational sovereignty pop up very frequently. Number three, change management. So the move from existing systems to new systems that are run and operated remotely can be quite a challenge. Number four is the gaps or the gap in executives' understanding of cloud capabilities and value state. Sometimes cloud is seen as a very exotic term, something that's out of this world. Well, it is not. It is just infrastructure, but just managed by people who are more proficient in that space. Number five is the complexity of legacy environments, legacy platforms and apps. I'm talking here about things like mainframe, like applications developed in old languages, programming languages like COBOL, or maybe about vertical solutions like what you can find in the telecommunications space. From our perspective, there is a solution for every problem. We can move pretty much any type of workload into Google Cloud. Number six is the cost. It's always there. It's always a problem. Cost is a resource that is finite, definitely, and we understand that. And number seven is the operating model of cloud. So when you operate your applications and resources on-prem, you have one way of doing it. You might be abiding by the old world coming from the ITIL processes and what have you. Moving to the cloud is slightly different and it can be quite challenging to understand that. So how do you overcome those challenges? So we've got a simple four-step methodology. And it spans over four major steps. First one is discovery. Then it's followed by planning, migration, and finally optimization. Actually, it is not a four linear steps. You'll follow this overarching process, but in many cases, these steps are done in iterations. So let's look at how we are doing the discovery and assessment. Your initial goal, of course, is in this phase is to build the case, the business case overall for migration. You want to convince your executives, your management. There are three dimensions that are typically analyzed: culture, IT landscape, and cost. We'll build an ROI, a return on investment analysis, to show you what costs look like in Google Cloud. We will tailor and adjust this as the migration scope is refined, as it is fine-tuned, but this will help you build an initial business case to show to your management. The goal here is to understand that what you have today and what you want to do with it. We'll typically look to gather inventory data of your whole estate in one go, but then we'll build a backlog of business unit, data center location, technology type, and other details as well, and gather the business level detail accordingly. This phase is the starting point of your migration journey, but we often find customers want this as a standalone service. We can talk about that, how we can help you with it later on. As a first step, we analyze your as is, which is where you are today, and understand together where you want to be tomorrow or your to be. Our analysis will be along the lines of people, processes, and technology. So example relationships between epics are: we emphasize on architecture to design for failure rather than incident management once things have already fallen over. We emphasize identity and access over networking to establish trust in the right people with the right devices accessing the right resources. We emphasize upskilling, which is a proactive way to know what's going on, over communication, which is passive. We won't dwell on the model framework by itself right now, but it informs actually the way it will help you go through your migration. As a second step, we will identify the optimal migration path of each of your workloads. Ultimately, some assets will be retired because they are replaced by higher level cloud services or functions or inherent functionality. For example, things like hardware firewalls that are on-prem might be immediately replaced by the hardware functionality, which is part of the cloud network. Some will be retained on-prem because of regulation sometimes, or because of an ROI constraint. For example, if you had just purchased an asset a month or two ago, it might not make business sense to replace it immediately, but rather to wait until the ROI is realized. Having said that, the fun part actually lies in all of the other paths that we can identify in this slide, which are the rehost, and that's typically the lift and shift, replatform, and transform, which is a refactor and replace. So this is an example of the outcome of step 2 typically. It shows the type of categorization and prioritization developed at this stage. On the left-hand side, the application assessment will discover the whole estate or application that you have in your data center or your on-prem setup. And on the right-hand side, we kind of break it down into virtual machines or physical servers for that matter, and their corresponding migration strategy. The third and last step of this process aims to understand the return on investment of the migration. So we collect data in multiple ways: auto discovery tools, configuration databases, or CMDBs. Sometimes we can even find spreadsheets that are just maintained by the operations teams. And we evaluate the current running costs versus the projected future Google Cloud spend. Once this is done, we aggregate all of this into simple ROI reports that clearly highlights the monetary value of exiting your data center or your on-premise environment. So these are really very simple, typically one-pager reports. And as an example, we can see here a concrete example of a single-page, higher level report. And it shows the comparison of the type of information we can provide through a completed assessment. So first, you see a 3-year cost comparison of an on-premise versus Google Cloud for running 617 virtual machines. So here we see how Google really helps reduce your costs. So, and those areas can be broken down into things like how you only pay for what you use instead of over-provisioning. No peak load pre-provisioning, which is typically done on-premise as well, and eliminating the excess storage needed typically for on-prem redundancy. There are also other categories that can take into consideration, and these are typically discovered as well when we do this kind of assessment. So how do we put all of this into practice? So first, let's look at discovery. First up, we have tools, and those tools, as an example, we're working with Cloud Physics and Stratozone. So Google Cloud will provide these tools at no cost. And these tools are automated tools that can pretty much automate the whole process of discovery and assessment. We work also with customers to leverage services either from our huge ecosystem of partners, as well as our professional services organization, which can help in this process. And finally, before closing, most customers usually ask us, how do I get started? And the answer for that is very simple. Just reach out to us. There are resources that are available online. You can sign up for free discovery and assessment. There we have a link here that we can share after this presentation. And typically either one of our partners will reach out, or as well as Google Cloud engineers might reach out to you to understand what are the requirements from your end. We want to learn also, we want to learn a bit more. So we provide lots of resources on migration overall with all of the steps that I mentioned earlier. I talked only about discovery and assessment, but we can walk you through the other 3 steps in our cloud migration framework. And of course, if you have any specific question that you would like to ask us, we'll be more than happy to engage with you and have a further discussion about this. So that's pretty much it. Thank you very much for tuning in. Kindly visit the cloud.google.com/migrate for more hands-on learning, training, and demos from Google Cloud experts. And see you next time. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Marwan. Let me see if there are any questions from the audience for you. I don't see any questions at the moment. Any questions for Marwan? Let's see. All right, great. There are no questions, Marwan. Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. Now it's time to move on to the next presenter. And we're going to hear from a CIO, right? So to do this, let me invite on stage Jay Kumar Mohanachandran, the Group CIO at Isa Saleh Al Ghur Group. So a quick introduction about Jay. Is a business technology executive with sizable global corporate experience and a track record of driving business results through organizational, process, and technology innovation. Is adept at developing and motivating large, diverse business technology organizations with experience in major transformation initiatives and governance. And he has a deep understanding of manufacturing, real estate, retail, and industrial businesses with the acumen across the whole value chain. Jay, it's your turn.
Thank you, Jeevan, and thank you, CXO Inside Middle East, for inviting me today. Good morning, everyone. Hope all of you are staying safe and healthy in this, difficult times. Let me just share my screen. I hope my screen is visible to everyone, and we're good to go. So 2020 has been a complete different year for all of us. I think, if we ask people to define 2020, we'll get a lot of adjectives, be it disruptive, be it transformative, be it whatnot, resilience. We heard a lot of words and a lot of terminologies about 2020. And some of them we cannot even discuss over here, but at the same time, it's been completely different for all of us. So what it means for the data center business and what it means for CIOs like us who are there in the industry for quite long, who has never seen something like this happening. So are we closing down our data centers and moving everything to cloud? I mean, there is a lot of notion like that where people are trying to put everything back onto cloud, and it's talk about a lot of availability and high availability and being always on and things like that. So today we'll be discussing quickly about a few of the topics which will actually be interesting for some of us. How can we reimagine the data center in this new digital era? So I'm the group CIO for Isa Saleh Al Ghur, and we as a group, we are established in 1960, and it's a 100% family-owned company. One among the top 10 Arab family business rated by Forbes in the Middle East. And we have 3,000 plus employees across 5 sectors and close to about 30 companies under the group. And we have about 7 joint ventures with 500 plus brands. We have a portfolio covering retail and lifestyle and consumer products, building and construction and real estate and industrial business, and few joint ventures. And these are a few of our key brands, starting from Dunlop, Simatic, Siemens, Siemens Healthineers, Meg, and some of the luxury fashion retail brands as well. So what are we going to discuss today is all about the data centers. So let me put it this way. The depth of the data center is being greatly exaggerated. I agree. I'm sure that all of you can agree to this. I mean, there is a lot which is going on. As I said in my introduction, people are trying to keep everything towards the cloud, but at the same time, there is a lot of notion that the data center is dead. It's not that. But then what it is? Let's look at what Gartner says. Gartner is saying your data center is not dead, but it's morphing. It's an interesting tagline. It was announced last year around September 2020. So what do you mean by morphing? There is a lot of changes that's happening across enterprises. And I think especially within companies who are in many of the industries within the space, everybody is trying to move towards digital. And this is one of the things which is very evident nowadays. Even a person who doesn't had any knowledge about digital or digital transformation is talking about it, which means it's the need of the hour. And all the companies are trying to go digital in wherever possible. And this means there is an enormous stress on our data centers. So why is it like that? We'll talk about it in the coming slides. There are three aspects which I'll be discussing today. The first one to start with is trust. So what do you mean by trust? It is all about protecting your organization, data, and people. So when it comes to the security of your data, everybody is concerned about it. We wanted to have it completely secure, ensure that it is completely having an intelligent security integrated with it. Everybody needs the transparency of where our data is and how it has been managed. And we all wanted full control over it. And privacy by design, we look forward for that when we search for any data center partners across regions. And what do we mean by compliance leadership? So compliance is one word and leadership is one word, is it? So then we look at compliance leadership. So it's nothing else other than leading the regulatory compliance. So when we look at the compliance leadership, this is something which is again comes very critical nowadays. If we want to kind of keep our data outside, then we wanted to look at players who are able to do that by having the right regulatory compliance. The next topic, which is equally important, is about the mobility. It should enable you and your people to get things done from anywhere. So we are in that era where things should happen from any part of the world. I think the last couple of months or years, a year plus now, we all have been working from any part of the world seamlessly. And this is something which is going to be the future as well. So what it means, access from any device, work from anywhere. And at the same time, this means a lot of data is disparated across different platforms, which means the security and identity has to be also managed, because we can access our data from multiple data centers. And at the same time, then it becomes equally important that we manage and secure our identities. And it should be always up to date. The third pillar is about the intelligence. So we talk about this one, everybody needs analytics now. And it's all about understanding the business in detail and discovering the relevant content which is required for each individual, improving the personal effectiveness that works for each individual. So taking on with these three pillars, if we talk about trust, mobility, and intelligence, what it means, how this is getting converted into a data center business. Again, let's go back to a tagline of Gartner. Gartner is saying by 2025, 85% of infrastructure strategies will integrate on-premises, co-location, cloud, and edge delivery options, compared with 20% in 2020. So moving from 20 to 85% of the whole strategies will actually integrate all these on-premises, co-location, and cloud delivery options, including the edge, which means every one of us as CIOs or technology leaders will have to go through a lot of rework in terms of making sure that our strategy, so there is nothing called a perimeter right now. Our perimeter is already out, is there in some of the other clouds and some of the data centers that are out. So we just need to devise the strategies that should cover all these locations put together. And that's how it becomes a lot more important going forward. This is going to be the key. I mean, when we define any infrastructure strategy, it's all going to revolve around the workload placement. So those days are gone where we talk about everything which is going to be safe and secure within our data center, which is a traditional approach of having monolithic applications within our data centers. Going forward is those times where we talk about the workload placements. Is this workload good enough to keep in an edge, or good enough to keep in a cloud, or good enough to keep that within our traditional data centers? So this becomes the point of discussion going forward in terms of defining the strategies for technology leaders. So let's think about how can we envision a new data center. So when we talk about any new data center business in this kind of era, what happens is there is a lot of change that's happening in the data center business. And that's something which is quite interesting, because as demands are higher and people are trying to go more and more cloud and on the edge, this means the data center business is equally soaring. It's not that it's dead, it's equally soaring. None of the small and medium enterprises may be building a data center now going forward, which means again, the requirements will be higher on the data center business. And that's the reason why more and more players are coming into the region. So when we look at the new data center, which is going to be the future, these are a couple of things, or these are 5 pillars which we can talk, which would be key in any data center operator to sustain in their business. So the first one to start is the programmable infra. So what do you mean by that? I mean, like in the traditional world, if we have to provision few servers, it would have been taken, I think all of us have gone through that, taking multiple codes and, getting it ordered and all of those stuff. But this has gone into a virtualization mode quite long back. We started getting the servers up and running in 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes kind of thing. And nowadays, we are talking about an API culture, which is like a software-defined data center. So what do you mean by that? All the components within the data center should have APIs that should be able to communicate with each other. And we are talking about a completely automated and orchestrated data center. And this is something which every data center operator and business has to consider. The next one is always about, next one talks about always on. So again, traditionally, if you look at always on infrastructure, we used to evaluate this, and this was prohibitively expensive. When we talk about an RTO, recovery time objective in a DR perspective, it was prohibitively expensive, but these pseudo always on concept comes from applications that are containerized, microservices based, which can self-heal, it is downtime free, and it is completely on cloud-based DR. So this is the concept which is going to be up and running for the future for all the data center operations. And moving on with the pervasive fabric, again, some of the large companies have gone through a lot of changes in their applications in the past, and that means they port a lot of workloads towards cloud, and the future of the data centers is going to be hybrid in nature and supporting a lot of multi-clouds, which means they need a single pane of glass to manage the entire infrastructure and the infrastructure lifecycle. So this becomes again one of the important topic for any of the data center considerations. And moving on with the web scale agility, again, it talks about the microservices and the DevOps. Again, some of the companies, if you look, they have a lot of changes which they would like to do on their applications. Some of the statistics say that large enterprises will have to do about 100 to 200 changes in their applications, which means again DevOps and this elasticity is something which is going to be key in consideration for the future. So that agility is something which is going to be very critical, and this will be one of the biggest consideration for any operator going forward. And we talk about the last one is the cognitive IT. Again, integration of AI/ML into the automation of data centers. There is a lot that is happening on the data center business. As I've said earlier, the edge is growing very fast, like the primaries and the other major data centers. And we have to learn from the patterns, integrating AI/ML, look at the patterns and look at an auto reconfigurable and self-heal options for these data centers. All this is completely packed with security, either the cyber security or the physical security, and the financial modeling with a cultural transformation. And this is what we can see that as the new data center concept coming up. So this will lead us towards a transformation journey. And what do you mean by that transformation? So as we see here, there are three major heads. if you look at the DC maturity, we, as I said earlier, we started off with virtualizing all our servers. More than 80% of the virtual infrastructure is already set up in most of the companies. So in our case, we have about 99% of the servers are virtualized. And there is a lot of automation that's happening on the data center, which means we are trying to bring that always on concept and ensure that the monitoring and capacity optimization is handled properly. And this will actually help us in terms of moving towards with the transformation journey, which is required for the current businesses. And then currently there is evaluation happening in all organizations where historically there was no support for moving towards cloud. We have now started thinking into a cloudified environment where we can self-service, charge back, and all of those options which we discussed in the previous slide. This is something which is going to be imperative from now and going forward. And the last would be converting this whole thing into a service broker kind of a model where we convert the IT as a revenue center. And I mean, this was a topic which was widely discussed in the past, but there was not much success stories. But I think going forward for large conglomerates like us or for any major enterprises, this becomes quite imperative again. It'll be an important validation to do. Can we do this? Is there any benefit out of converting us as a service broker and converting IT as a revenue making asset? So with that, let me just move on to my final slide. So what are the data center trends to watch out? As we say about hyperscalers are there in the market, for quite a long time. So currently with this 2021 and beyond, the hyperscalers is here to grow, which means there is a lot of requirements on the different industries like manufacturing or retail or real estate for that matter, which requires, or even healthcare for that matter, which they cannot cater it in their current data centers, and it has to be consolidated into multiple servers. So which means the hyperscaler business is here to grow. And nobody puts edge in the corner. Again, let me just put an example of manufacturing again. If you look at the IoT business, that is growing significantly. And say there is a result which we need to calculate from a shop floor, and it doesn't have to travel all the world across to some cloud that is hosted in Europe or US. So which means the edge is getting more significant, and the requirements are more significant. If you look at the CDNs of YouTube or any other broadcasting network, we can see the importance of the significance of edge coming up. So that's why edge is going to be the future. So both hyperscalers and edge will actually grow together, and there will be at least 1 by 10 or maybe 1 by 20th of the volume of edge data centers that will be coming up per data center across all regions. And the next one would be about the greening game. So what do you mean by this? Again, I talked about the compliance leadership earlier. It's all about looking at the regulatory standards, whether it is ISO 14001 or any of the environmental standards, just to ensure that all the data centers comply to the green or the sustainable mode of operations. And this becomes again very, very important. Why? Because the energy consumption of the growing data center business is something which is equally, I was listening to a story or a panel discussion in India about the data center business, and there were people from SIFI and the large data center businesses there. They were talking about the consumption of data center business, the power consumption of the data center business, and it's almost half of the country's consumption. So which means countries like UAE and countries like here in the Middle East, everybody will have to start thinking about this, and all the data center operators will have to seriously think about this. And this will be a very good watch out to see how they use the renewable energies and how they will convert each of these things into a recyclable options to ensure that they remain green going forward. And the next one would be the automation. Automation is again becoming key because edge is growing, and with the kind of pandemic situation, we have seen that we cannot have people all across all the time in our data centers. And this means it becomes imperative that the data centers needs to be automated. And AI/ML again coming into the picture, even from rack rollouts to managing the temperature or managing anything within the data center. Everything will have to get automated going forward. And the 5G, the impact of 5G is something which is very, very critical. I think many of the operators have still not realized the real value out of it. And again, edge being the future, and IoT business is developing purely based on 5G. So this will add a lot of value towards multiple industries, and it will have an impact on the data center business as well going forward. So with that, I think I'm done. I hope it was having some insights. I could share some insights, and thank you for tuning in. Thank you so much. Good day, everyone.
Thank you, Jay Kumar, for that wonderful presentation. Always a pleasure listening to you, because I learn something new every time I listen to you. Let's see if you have any questions from the audience for you. I don't think there are any questions, so we'll let you go. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeevan.
Right, now it's time to start our panel discussion, and let me invite our panelists. Shaista Ahmed from Nutanix, Mohammed Al-Tamimi from Rubrik, Hans Ergeni Tamer from Comscope, and George Paulison from Rackspace.
Hello. Hi, good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Okay, so everyone is in. So, as our first speaker said today, most of the organizations are spending a huge chunk of their IT budgets are just keeping the lights on, right? To keep the legacy systems and the applications running, which is why I think data center transformation should be a top priority for CIOs today. So my first question to the panel today is, what are some of the ongoing challenges that your data center customers face? First, if I could start with you.
Sorry, Jeevan, what were you saying? I'm sorry.
What are some of the ongoing challenges that your data center customers face?
I think, Jeevan, to start with, I think the biggest problem that the data centers are facing today is the IT staff are spending too much time just dealing with the provisioning, running and maintaining of the core infrastructure, because this in itself does not add any real value to the business, but there are so many dependencies in a typical data center that the people need to spend a lot of time because, they have to do the upgrades in a certain order. If not, it will carry a lot of risk. So when the local teams aren't seasoned enough, to necessarily manage the entire infrastructure stack, they're limited to a specific area, then they end up spending too much time just doing the upgrades and provisioning. And also another important factor is security. I think security is becoming more and more important. As we can see today, every other day, there are so many attacks that are happening. So the data center team trying to manage the security risk as well as to protect everything, it's becoming more and more burdensome on them. So I think these are some of the big challenges that they have today.
All right, Tabibi, can I get your thoughts on this?
Yes, sure. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, I'd like to add to what Shaista just said. Some of the challenges are still maintaining availability and uptime. That is always on. Another thing is improving staff productivity. Again, as Shaista said, we notice employees are doing things that they should not be doing. It should be more automated. It should be much more simplified, and having them focus on much more important thing. Obviously, reducing operational cost and reducing cost overall will always remain a challenge and a priority. And saving cost is not only by saving cost of the equipment that you buy or the solutions that you implement, but also how you can automate it and simplify it. Last thing is cybersecurity attack, especially ransomware. It's hitting left, right, and center. Previously, it used to target your production environment. In the last few years, it's even targeting your backup and traditional backup. And once backup is encrypted, the game is over. That's from my side.
All right, Hans, can I have your thoughts on this from a physical layer standpoint?
Yeah, that will be that will be quite different to the ones from the speakers before. So when it comes to the physical layer, what the customers are most interested in and keen to find a solution is how to deal with migration and growth in their data center. When I talk to customers about data center design, data center cabling design, they have two dominant questions that they need to get solved and answered. The first one is how can I make sure that the cabling can deal with all these different equipment and bandwidth and application generations that will come during the life of the data center? How can it deal with a bandwidth roadmap that I have in mind, the increase of speed, of the transmission speed inside the data center? And the second question is, how can I prepare my data center infrastructure, cabling infrastructure to cope with more cabling? Yeah. And to talk a little bit about the first question, the migration and the bandwidth roadmap, just to give you an idea how the bandwidth changes in data centers. From 1985 to 2009, there were 4 Ethernet speeds. So that's the transmission protocol for the data inside the data center, 4 Ethernet speeds. And from 2010 to today, we have 8 different speeds. So there is an inflation of Ethernet speeds, and every new speed comes with new requirements. For the connector, for the fibers, having a data center cabling infrastructure that is scalable enough, to deal with all these upcoming changes, that's key. And they want to have a solution. The customers want to have a proper solution that prevents the super GAU, that is the super chaos that is ripping out the cabling and installing a new one. Nobody wants to do that. Yeah. And the second point, growth, that has to do also with, more and more servers, more and more equipment coming into a data center over time, which also means more cabling. A good hint how to deal with that is always to look at when it comes to data center design, how much power and cooling do you plan from a margin perspective in your data center? So if you design a data center with 30 or 40% growth on the power and cooling, yeah, that's already a good hint to deal with to define the space that the additional cabling will need, because this then will also grow by 40 to 50%. So this is what really, keeps them awake at night, if you will. If the cabling is not planned properly, it will end up in a mess, and nobody wants that. So migration and growth are the keys when it comes to data center cabling design.
All right, perfect. George, can I ask you the same question?
Yes.
What are the challenges
hi.
that your face, the customers face? Yeah.
Yeah, hi everyone. I can give you the feedback from the customers that we speak to and the customers that we serve. And so, the current client set now, there's a challenge between everybody wants to save costs, but at the same time, they need to invest to do the data center transformation. And why are they under this pressure? Because with the rise of the adoption of cloud, every CIO now is being asked, why doesn't my data center operate the same way as a hyperscaler cloud does? Why can't I have everything automated? Why can't I pay on a subscription basis? Why do I have to do these big CapEx refreshes? So more and more they're looking for OpEx models, either in their own data center, or they're looking at going into third-party data centers. So that's one of the reasons why we have a lot of conversations about delivering private cloud as a service in clients' data centers. Security is also a huge issue for sure. And again, the challenge there is the rise of attacks and the sophistication of attacks. It's like an arms race. And it's very, very hard for the in-house teams to keep up with what are effectively government-backed armies of people attacking their data centers. So we get a lot of questions asking us about how can we help them keep up in this arms race, because it's so hard to get the skill sets up to speed in such a fast way, and that's often why they're looking for help in that area. So I think those are the two things that haven't been covered by our other great speakers that I hear from with my clients.
All right. So how can CIOs make sure that their private data centers and the cloud play together nicely? Because it can be a challenge, right? You need common management tools, governance, security, etc., etc. Tamimi, if I can ask you that question from a data management perspective.
Yeah. So we started our operation in the Middle East 4.5 years ago. And rubric is called cloud data management. Believe it or not, in the first year, like back in end of 2016, early 2017, I had to remove the word cloud from my presentation because customers would get afraid of the word cloud back in 2017. Obviously, things have evolved very fast. So now I do present cloud rubric as a cloud data management. And really what we mean is by cloud is you can have a private cloud, you can have in-country private cloud, you can use public cloud. We see Google, AWS, Azure opening data centers in the region, which is a big shift compared to a few years ago. So what we did in the last 4 years, we have helped customers build their private cloud. Cloud doesn't really mean it needs to be outside of the country. No, we help them build in-country private cloud. We partnered with top MSPs and top service providers where we have in-country private clouds across the region, so customers can protect their data on-prem, but again replicate it or have a backup as a service or DR as a service, and ensuring their data does not leave the country. One more thing is we always believed, but also we are seeing that teams within organizations they're having much more stronger collaboration. And what I mean by this, that we see that infrastructure team and info security team are talking to each other because at the end of the day, they share the same responsibility. And one last point, I believe customers should implement a cloud-ready solution. The CIO who presented previously, I was very impressed by his presentation. Some customers, maybe they are not ready to go to cloud this year, maybe they're going next year. So my simple, humble advice is you should invest in a technology that is cloud ready. So once your organization is ready, you don't need to put more investment. You don't need to buy more license or gateway to connect to cloud. That's it from my side.
All right. Hans, can I ask you the same question?
Yeah, of course. But actually, there is not much to contribute to this question from a physical layer perspective.
Okay.
It's more a software thing. You know, the cabling inside a premise DC or a cloud DC. You know, that what I said before is valid for both types. You know, if you have the redundant bandwidth on your external lines, on your wide area network lines, you know, then from a physical layer perspective, everything is done to enable these two different data center types to work together. We are dealing with all types of data centers, hyperscales, clouds, enterprise, and I have to come back to the point I made earlier. You know, they all have, from a physical layer perspective, to deal with migration and growth, and if that is done, the rest is done by the software side, as the speaker before was saying, and from a physical layer perspective, there's not much to add.
Sure. Shaista, why do you think a legacy data center don't make sense anymore in this age of digital transformation?
So Jeevan, as we're seeing, you know, how things are changing over the years, it's very quickly changing, and today are competing more and more with new startups, which have a very big advantage because they're able to quickly build, innovate digital business as they don't have any baggage of the legacy systems. While the competitors are focusing more on implementing machine learning and AI tools, the established organizations are still focused on keeping their systems up to date, patching, worrying about performance and growth. So this leaves them very little bandwidth to focus on designing truly modern competitive solutions. So it's becoming more and more harder for them to compete, when they use the approach of buying a solution where you use it for 5 years and then buy another solution, migrate the data, and then repeat the same thing all over again. So today's solutions, as Tamimi mentioned, it has to be purely software defined. It should be easy to evolve every few months, where you can just do it with software updates, just like the public cloud.
All right. And how do you actually transform a legacy data center into a private cloud? What are the steps involved?
So I think I can summarize it by saying that there are 3 key steps. First of all, to modernize your legacy system, it has to be 100% software stack. It should be built on a scalable, modular, and a self-healing system. It's extremely important. Once you do this, I think you need to automate it. This involves identifying the processes that you want to automate, and then use a solution that can automate these processes for you. And the next thing would be to expand to a hybrid cloud model. So today, modern on-prem private cloud offers a lot of performance and cost benefits, but having the ability to burst into the public cloud, where it has a lot of advantages, where you could just do something for a short time period, where there is a demand is high. You don't have to pay for the entire year. You just do it for a specific short period, and it is very good for development as well. But the key question that comes here is, when you're doing this integration between a private and public cloud, how are you going to manage it? The managing has to be extremely simple and seamless, and you should be able to do this through a single platform. That's very key. And also, we have to make sure that we avoid a lot of complexities, because a lot of people talk about having data on-prem and in the cloud, but what they need to really make sure is that it should be simple, it should be self-automated solutions, and there shouldn't be too many components that are there. So otherwise we will just end up spending the same amount of time, and we will be keeping the lights on. So there are a lot of things that we need to keep in mind, but the most important thing would be to have a software-defined stack.
Right. George, do you think any digital transformation initiative should start with data center transformation?
I think, well, it ends up in data center transformation and how you decide what workloads go in the transformed data center versus the public cloud. It usually starts from the business, especially of legacy businesses, shouting out, we're getting killed by the companies that Shaista was talking about, that are born in the cloud, who can deliver new functionality in a week or 2 weeks rather than 6 months. And that flows down into the data center, where they want to be able to provision and move their CI/CD workload into production on a weekly basis, and not on a multi-month basis. So absolutely hinges on data center transformation. All the things that were mentioned by the previous speaker 100% make sense in terms of software defined. But if I talk about customers who are in that hybrid state, I think there's a couple of things that we also need to think about. One is security, making sure that as you start shifting your workloads between public and private, that you have a seamless security across those platforms. And you can obviously use tools like Active Directory, AWS AD Connector, or Google IAP, to make sure that those simple things you don't create problems by moving over. And then from a people's perspective, I think we need to understand that the transformation, one of the biggest things that my clients face is the actual cultural change of moving from a DevOps continuous deployment model, which a transformed data center has to deliver, from their legacy way of operating, is one of the biggest challenges that they have. So we are often asked to help them redesign their service management processes, how they use their tools or even introduce new tools, and also generate new operating models for how everyone from the data center team through the service management team, as well as the DevOps team, all work together. So there's something we need to bear in mind, that self-healing and automation are great, but there still are people involved in the process. Some would say, unfortunately, but I don't think it's ever going to go away completely. And that part of the equation is still critical to manage, and a huge challenge for legacy customers.
Sure. Tamimi, you said now the bad guys are going after backup after as well, right? Does it make sense to pay a ransom? Even if you pay the ransom, do you think you're going to get your data back? Can you just trust these criminals?
Very critical question you asked. So again, what we noticed is that many years ago, ransomware hackers would go and they would encrypt your production, laptops, desktops, server, storage. And then they would ask you to pay the ransom. So customers would use to restore from their backup and not pay the ransom. Obviously, hackers are very intelligent people. They are humans. They have responsibilities. They have families and schools and bills to pay. So they need to evolve always. So it's not a human attack anymore. It's more of machine learning, and they do like mass attack, and whatever they manage to get, they will abuse it. So they started encrypting your backup. And if you think of it, backup is like insurance policy. If they get into your backup, a game is over. You cannot restore. So we noticed the amount of ransomware being paid is increasing by billions. And they have a reputation to keep as well. The hackers themselves, like who do ransomware, they have a very good reputation, And what I mean by this is that the first reputation that they successfully can hit your data and lock it. The second reputation that they keep is that once you transfer the money, they will give you the code to retrieve your data. So why customers do pay? There are many reasons. Number one, restoring this data will take not hours, it can take days or weeks sometimes to restore the data. Number two, customers are really not aware which environment has been compromised by this cyber attack. All what they know that they have some machines that have been locked. This is how they found out, and a message come up that you have to pay the ransom, but they don't know how bad the damage is. So maybe it's easier for them to pay and then restore their data. What we really pitch is that Rubrik as a data management solution, as a cloud data management solution, was born in the era of ransomware and was born in the era of cloud. So we're a cloud-ready solution, and by default, our solution has immutability against ransomware. There have been several attacks globally into government accounts and healthcare and banking sector and oil and gas. If you go to YouTube or to our website, you will find some testimony from the customers who would say, yes, we got hit by ransomware. However, the data that has been backed up by Rubrik, we managed to retrieve it. Not only retrieve it, but also retrieve it very fast.
All right. All right, we're going to go back to Hans. Hans, what is the impact of cloud and edge computing and all that on the actual design of the physical layer? Are we going to see more and more fiber in the data center because copper seems to have reached its limit in terms of speed and transmission?
Yes, we do. I think what happened with the rise of the cloud data centers is a new network topology. The old style data centers, they have been using a so-called 3-tier network topology. That means 3 layers of switches, a core switch, some core switches, aggregation switches, and the access switches where the servers have been attached to. From a server virtualization, from a cloud perspective, from cloud native application perspective, this is a bad technology, if you will, because it is a slow technology for those applications. Cloud data centers, due to server virtualization, have a lot of what we call east-west traffic. That means traffic in the data center rows between the servers, so not in and out of the data center. And if I have a slow network, meaning a lot of switches, meaning a lot of hops, and every switch adds delay to the transmission, then the overall data center performance is slow because of the high latency. And that caused the rise of a new technology, a new topology, which is called spine leaf technology or topology, which means you have only 2 layers of switches, the so-called spine switches, that are, let's say, the backbone of the network. And then you have the leaf switches where the servers and all the other equipment is attached to. That means 2 layers, less switches, and therefore reduced latency. In addition, those 2 switch layers are connected together in a so-called cloth design, which is an any-to-any non-blocking design. And therefore, the data centers that are built that way are state-of-the-art and have the lowest latency and the highest speed. The good thing for us as a physical layer manufacturer, if you will, is that there is a lot more fiber cabling required to combine all these spine and leaf switches together. And that also raises some issues, you know, with more cabling, meaning you have to design the cabling properly, because you have to take care, because it's all fiber, about band radius control. A lot of data centers are built with pre-terminated cabling. That means you have to take care of the overlaying storage. So a lot of additional things, in addition to the performance of the actual cable, have to be considered with this spine leaf technology. More fiber and more cabling in general in a data center raises also a management problem of the physical layer. I think Yaya Kumar was talking about this briefly. More and more common in cloud data centers are so-called AIM systems, automated infrastructure management systems, that allow to manage the physical layer from several aspects. Key features here are real-time documentation, so you always know what the state of your data center cabling is. It also allows a proper capacity planning then based on that real-time 100% accurate documentation. And last but not least, it is to talk about automation. There is a proper work order planning possible with such a tool, because I know what kind of cabling, which ports are free on a switch, which ports are free on the patch panel of the cabling, so I can do a proper planning of my moves, adds, and changes in the data center.
All right. Shaista, now we are talking about zero-touch administration of data centers. Is that really possible now, or is that going to be a technology pipe dream?
I think having zero touch would be every administrator's dream today. But you know, a while back, I just saw some statistics from Facebook which said that they have one administrator assigned to more than 17,000 servers. This definitely is not zero touch, but I think is pretty low. I don't think any data center can be zero touch, and it doesn't need to be. How we can achieve significant lower touch by having self-automated monitoring and self-healing systems like Nutanix. I mean, you know, we can really bring down the amount of time the administrators are spending in monitoring upgrades and patching and things like that. And this time can be used by them to do something more productive, which can actually bring more value to the business. So I don't think zero touch would ever happen, but low touch definitely.
All right. You know, recently, Gartner has said that by 2025, 80% of the organizations would shut down their traditional data centers, right? So Tamimi, do you think the on-prem data center is dead? Is everything going to move to the cloud?
I'm sure it will not look the same as it used to, but no, I don't believe it will go away. It will be utilized differently. Customers will start deploying much more of software-defined solution. cloud-ready solution. They will move away from traditional infrastructure to hyper-converged and converged solution, where it will give them flexibility to grow as they need and scale out without losing on previous investment. So the answer is no, it will not go away, but it will be utilized differently.
Do you agree with that, George?
Yeah, on-prem data centers definitely not going away. You know, you have edge computing there. That's not going to go away. In some cases, people are going to need more data centers close to the data. There's still going to be customers who benefit from the ability to, you know, control the in-cloud tuning and operations. There'll still be customers with certain workloads where it's actually still more cost effective to be on premises. You might see less and less people upgrading their own physical data centers and taking advantage of third-party co-location services to avoid the capex. But you know, data centers last a long time, but it's the electromechanical that they have to spend on the refresh. So I think people are more confident and comfortable, you know, in doing that. And I think, you know, we'll see more and more hybrid cloud solutions. And we're also definitely seeing in this region, because of data sovereignty, we're seeing hyperscalers implementing in countries they're proliferating like bean sprouts. In Europe, you would never have so many regions in such a small geographical area. But because of data sovereignty, you're seeing amazing investments from GCP and now just AWS announcing in UAE. And it's quite an interesting trend to see that. You wouldn't have probably expected that 5 or 6 years ago. So they're clearly making the investment down to the country level almost, where they, because they feel confident more and more people are going to take advantage of it.
Hans, do you think on-prem data centers will stay?
Yeah, I think I can agree to the previous speakers. That's what we see in our customer base as well. I think the enterprise customers are differentiating or looking at it differently than, let's say, 5, 6 years ago, where there was that big hype and phrases like no on-premise data centers will be there in 2025 or so. I think there will be a coexistence of both data centers because of several reasons. Companies learn how to use the cloud better together with their own data centers. Some companies, or actually a lot of companies, have very old systems that they still have to, have up and running, legacy systems that, especially in the financial area, where you just cannot easily put it to the cloud. And if you do, with a lot of efforts and financial impact. So I think there will be a coexistence between on-prem and cloud. Maybe, like George said, the on-prem will move a little bit more, especially for the smaller data centers, towards the co-location. But I don't think that, that it will be cloud only. There will be enterprise-owned data centers in future as well.
I think another interesting trend is that, clients are now starting to explore out ways of bringing the cloud into their data center. So we heard earlier from GCP, this ability to, have bare metal solution for Anthos. And as people start, deciding how they're going to go, serverless, infrastructure as code, we're going to see, I think, the hyperscalers investing more. I think, the different solutions like, Stack and Outpost, they've had limited success. Outpost, probably because of the cost, and, and Azure Stack, not because it doesn't have the full version. Google's taken an interesting approach with Anthos, where people can, effectively have maybe a shortcut to a private cloud in their data center if they've decided to go the container route. And you might see more of that as CIOs are deciding, how can I be cloud ready? I think, as one of the speakers spoke earlier. I think the hyperscalers will continue to respond to that. They won't give up. They will be in your data centers somehow.
Shaista, do you agree with our panelists, other panelists here? On-prem data centers are here to stay? Not.
Absolutely. I know that everything is moving towards the cloud. Definitely, there will be a lot of workloads that are going to move towards the cloud. But we also need to understand that every application that is being used today is not cloud native. Yeah. So there will be a need for us to have on-prem data centers in order to run some of the key applications. Like especially in the banking segment, I don't think there will be anytime soon where they'll become 100% cloud, because there are certain core applications that they need to run on-prem. So I think there's going to be a mix. Definitely the trend is going to be that they're going to move towards the cloud, especially the smaller organizations, because it will be more cost effective and it makes them very agile. To expand and to contract whenever it's required. So I think it will be a mix. So it's going to be on-prem and cloud together, more hybrid.
Perfect.
I think.
Perfect. I think.
Well, what you're seeing with the legacy companies, I mean, banks is a very good example. I've spent a lot of time talking to banks. Those that can afford it, are slowly moving their client-facing applications onto cloud-native platforms, whether it's in the data center on systems like Nutanix, or whether it's on the cloud. And then, ultimately, over time, all you're seeing left in the legacy is a database server or a back office transaction server that, depending on how big the bank is, some banks are so big they'll never be able to get rid of that without spending tens of millions. But you're seeing a massive shift even with huge banks of moving their front end and their omni-channel solutions onto cloud type solutions, platforms. Yeah.
All right. So I think it's time to wrap up this interesting discussion. And let me see if there are any questions. We may be able to take one or two questions. If there are any, let me just quickly check if there are any questions from the audience. Well, I don't think there are any questions. So thanks a lot, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us today. It's an interesting discussion.
Thank you.
And thank you once again to all our attendees joining us today. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to our sponsors once again.